all set? Okay. Good morning, everyone. Hello, I'm Michigan Attorney General Dana Nessel, and with me today we have Daniel Hagman-Clark, our Chief of our Criminal Justice Bureau, Robin Liddell, Division Chief for our Criminal Trials, Heather Meingas, Chief of our Civil Rights and Elections Division, also Rick Cunningham, our fantastic Assistant Attorney General handling this matter, Aubrey Sargent, Chief of our Investigative Division, Bob Menard, one of our amazing special agents. Did I get everybody? Yes. Okay. In 2024, in the August primary election in Michigan, 4 St. Clair Shores residents voted twice. Now, this is a crime, and my office is prosecuting the 4 voters and 3 municipal election employees for crimes related to double voting. 1 person, 1 vote. It's a simple but highly important American value we've all known since we were children. When people violate this principle, they violate state law and undermine the most basic tenets of our American democracy. But 4 individuals in St. Clair Shores did just that. They voted twice, once by absentee ballot and once again on Election Day at their local polling places. Here in Michigan, we have significant barriers in place to keep this from happening, but on August 6, 2024, those vital protections failed because 3 election workers violated the law by ignoring systemic warnings and knowingly, willfully, allowing double voting to occur. And for that reason, we are announcing criminal charges against not only the 4 double voters, but as I have mentioned, also against 3 assistant clerks who enabled this to happen. Now, I want to be clear, these assistant clerks are not the volunteer election workers who greet you at the polls, but instead are municipal employees trained in election law and procedure with delegated authority by the elected municipal clerk. The actions of these 3 trained assistant clerks broke from established election rules so significantly that they committed a crime. Previous reporting falsely claimed that these illegal votes were not counted in unofficial election results. However, that is simply not true. These double votes were in fact counted during the August 2024 primary, but fortunately they did not affect the outcome of those results or of any races. Following the 2024 primary election in August, Abrielle Barrett, the clerk for the city of St. Clair Shores, correctly reported these 4 instances of double voting to Anthony Forlini, the elected Macomb County clerk, the St. Clair Shores Police Department, and the State Bureau of Elections. Despite common talking points by those who seek to instill doubt in our electoral process, double voting in Michigan is extremely rare. Michigan has over 4,300 voting precincts, and more than 1.8 million Michigan residents voted in the August primary. In that primary, there were 59 reported instances of double voting in Michigan, accounting for less than 0.005% of the total votes. Nevertheless, the fact that 4 incidents occurred in a single municipality of this size raises significant concerns. It's shocking, and it's simply unheard of. There are procedures in place to ensure that this does not happen, and that's why it so rarely does. It really took a perfect storm to come together to allow these 4 individuals to double vote, which included voters who were willing to vote twice, the completion of affidavits that were false, poll workers who did not turn them away as they should have, and municipal clerks who illegally altered the qualified voting file. The confluence of so many of these things had to happen in order for this to occur. So, yes, we have sufficient procedures in place, which is likely why it's so rare that this happens. And for this to have occurred, it required multiple people in a concentrated area that were willing to break the law all on the same day during the course of a single election. In this case, the facts, as alleged, are as follows. 4 individuals appeared in person at their respective polling locations in St. Clair Shores, requesting ballots to vote in the August primary election. We allege that upon arrival, they were informed by their local poll volunteers that they had previously completed and returned their absentee ballots, and yet, due to the failure of the city employees, were otherwise still allowed to vote in person that day. In each instance, across 3 separate precincts, the volunteer election workers on site at the polling locations saw the warnings on the electronic poll book, an electronic record of voter information that is assessed by poll workers at election sites that indicated that the voter had already voted by absentee ballot and that their ballot had been received and approved for tabulation by the local clerk. These absentee ballots were being contemporaneously counted already by designees of the city clerk at a separate location, demonstrating the proper functioning of the checks and balances in our election system. However, despite the clear and very obvious warnings displayed in the electronic poll book, the election workers on site contacted a designated municipal call-in center seeking direction from the assistant clerks and were instructed to issue the would-be voters a second ballot and to override and ignore the very clear warning displayed on the poll book. The voters completed those ballots, they fed them into the tabulator, and their votes were subsequently counted in on the in-person election day vote totals. 3 of the 4 voters wrongly completed an affidavit where they falsely claimed that they had not previously voted in this election, even though they had already had their votes counted in the election, and that vote was received and again already counted. The assistant clerks, phoned by the frontline election workers, then illegally altered the state qualified voter file to designate the previously issued, voted, and returned absentee ballot as having been rejected rather than received and approved for tabulation without making any effort at all to ensure that the corresponding ballot was rejected from the absentee voter counting board as it had already been received. The absentee ballots were all counted in the same day. What occurred here cannot be allowed to be repeated in the November general election. As to election workers, it is imperative that all election staff, volunteers, and assistant clerks abide by the laws of this state and the clear directives of both the Secretary of State and the local municipality. The conduct alleged here by the assistant clerks is a flagrant violation of election laws, and they criminally facilitated in the double voting. As to the individual voters, under state law, an individual who votes at an election, both in person and by means of an absent voter ballot, or an individual who even attempts to vote in person and by means of an absent voter ballot, is guilty of a felony. These are different crimes, and we are alleging that they are guilty of both. Additionally, any election employee who facilitates double voting may be found guilty of the exact same felony offense via an aiding and abetting theory. So as a result, today we are charging the following St. Clair Shores residents: Frank Prezzato, Stacy Kramer, Douglas Kempens, and Geneva O'Day, with 1 count of voting absentee and in person, and 1 count of offering to vote more than once. Additionally, we're charging the following St. Clair Shores election staff: Patricia Guciardo and Emily McClintock, with 1 count of falsifying election returns or records, 1 count of voting absentee and in person, and 1 count of offering to vote more than once. We're also charging Molly Brazier with 2 counts of falsifying election returns or records, and 2 counts of voting in person and absentee, and 2 counts of offering to vote more than once. Offering to vote more than once is a maximum penalty of 4 years. It's a felony. Voting in person and absentee is a maximum penalty that is a 5-year felony, and falsifying election returns or records is a maximum 5-year felony. It's important to note that while we do not know the specific motive of the voters or assistant clerks in taking these illegal actions, nor for most of them do we know their likely political affiliations, or for the voters involved. I will say for 2 of the assistant clerks, they had previously registered to work as election workers, and during their training, they both listed that they were members of the Democratic Party. But as to the 7 people who are charged, those are the only 2 whose parties are known to us. But none of that matters in this case, whether you're a Democrat, Republican, or an independent, a first-time voter, or a long-time voter. You only get 1 vote. And it is the job of our dedicated public servants to ensure this basic tenet of our democratic system is followed. This matter was referred to the Michigan Department of State, to the Department of Attorney General on August 15th of 2024. The day after, the local prosecuting agency, the Macomb County Prosecutor's Office, announced their intention to investigate and potentially prosecute this matter. And consistent with our standard response, our office allowed the local prosecutor to proceed in his investigation. This investigation was conducted initially by the St. Clair Shores Police Department, who transferred the matter to the Macomb County Prosecutor's Office in August. And shortly thereafter, the Macomb County Prosecutor's Office announced that they would not be pursuing criminal charges in the matter. But meanwhile, our office maintained consistent contact with the Michigan Department of State's Investigative Division, receiving investigative material in real time parallel to the Macomb County Prosecutor's Office while executing an independent investigation beyond the initial police report. Macomb County Prosecutor Pete Lucido announced on August 29th that his office would not be filing criminal charges. And upon my department's receipt of the case, however, it became immediately evident to us that these events, again, were extremely rare, extremely unusual, and that the prosecutor's office conducted no additional investigation of its own beyond what was submitted to them in the police report. And I will say, additionally, I watched some of the interviews of Prosecutor Lucido when he was denying the charges, and frankly, some of the statements he made were just factually inaccurate and also legally incorrect. My office undertook a thorough and investigative investigation of this matter. It's our opinion that the evidence supported the criminal charges and that it was plain to us. And while I won't speculate on why the Macomb County Prosecutor's Office declined to more thoroughly investigate or bring the appropriate criminal charges, it's just clear to us that the handling of this matter was insufficient. In our investigation, my office reviewed voting records, police reports from the St. Clair Shores Police Department, a report from the Michigan Department of State Enforcement Division. We interviewed election inspectors for the precincts involved. We conducted additional interviews with the now charged assistant clerks. We interviewed the city clerk and additionally the state's director of elections, as well as viewing the qualified voter file for the time-stamped changes that were made to the QVF. My office has been committed to pursuing, investigating, and when necessary, charging cases of election fraud, and we've done so when the evidence provides for criminal charges. Election integrity matters, and we must take these violations very seriously in order to ensure that we can trust the results on the other end. And we have charged residents for a wide variety of election-related crimes, ranging from voters who forged a signature on an absentee ballot or application to elected municipal clerks who made fraudulent entries in the qualified voter file or who broke the seals on election equipment. And we have many pending cases before the courts currently for election-related crimes. It's my hope that every single one of these cases serves to prevent others who may be considering violating Michigan's election laws, and as an educational moment for Michigan residents who choose to participate in our state's elections. The election process is very well documented from the moment your ballot is requested, either absentee or in person, to the moment it's counted, both at the counting boards and through the tabulator. And as we are in the early stages of widely expanded absentee and early voting, I cannot stress enough that when you violate these laws, supporting evidence of those crimes is incredibly easy for us to obtain. And we take those offenses very seriously, and we can and do proceed with criminal charges when warranted. Now, we recognize that many new election laws and policies have taken effect this year for the first time. And because of this, I, along with the Department of State, have been proactively traveling Michigan and hosting town halls to answer residents' questions. Furthermore, following the announcement by Prosecutor Lucido to not pursue charges, public statements by that prosecutor and media coverage of his statements present such a potential harm that I believe our actions are not only warranted, but very necessary. That previous media coverage of that situation could leave voters with the very mistaken belief that they could fill out and return an absentee ballot and then subsequently appear at their polling site on Election Day and spoil their absentee ballot and vote in person. You simply cannot do that. And I believe I have an obligation to clear that record and correct this false information espoused by the county prosecutor ahead of Election Day. And let me begin with this. You absolutely cannot spoil your absentee ballot on Election Day if it's already been returned to the clerk and approved for tabulation and then vote again in person. You can't do it. And I'm going to repeat that. Unless you did not mail back or place in a drop box your completed absentee ballot, you cannot and have not ever been able to spoil your absentee ballot on Election Day and then vote again. Not in 2024 and not in any of the previous decades leading up to today when it's already been received and approved for tabulation by the clerk. There is no reason, situation, or precedent in which this would ever be allowed under Michigan law. Under Michigan's newly expanded laws, clerks can now begin early processing absentee ballots as early as 8 days before Election Day, and a ballot which has been received by the clerk's office cannot be legally spoiled after Friday, October 25th, 2024, for this upcoming general election. Secondly, it is not true that voting by absentee ballot and in person at the polls is a frequent occurrence. Election deniers have tried to assert this, but as stated before, the numbers show that double voting is extremely rare. Experience shows that the most common cause of this action is when the election inspector simply did not check the electronic poll book, or the voter voted in 2 states in which they maintain residence. Either way, the Bureau of Elections can easily identify those cases, and when they rise to criminal actions in Michigan, the case is referred to my department for further investigation and charges. And if I can for a moment speak directly to the clerks, deputy and assistant clerks, election volunteers, there is not a cause to second guess yourself in prior elections. If you're thinking, oh no, what if I made that mistake? You have not. We would have found out about it, and this was whether, we're talking about something intentional. I mean, in this particular case, this was specifically intentional. It was clearly wrong. It was not a minor mistake. It wasn't somebody who flippantly or accidentally made a mistake here. For the voters of our state who want to track their absentee ballots, we have an easy way to do that at mi.gov/vote. And from there, you can see a sample of your ballot, the date that your absentee ballot was requested, mailed, and received and approved for tabulation, and your in-person polling places for early and Election Day voting. Election security matters, and in our federal elections, it's not just a state interest, but a national interest that we hold secure elections. And as the state's top law enforcement agency directly charged with upholding Michigan's laws, our role here at the Department of Attorney General is to ensure that justice is done and Michiganders are protected from frauds perpetrated against our institutions. In November, Michigan voters will once again go to the polls to make their voice heard for representatives representative seats of power, all the way from township or city hall to the White House. And already the nation's eyes are on our home state. Let me be very clear. We will not tolerate criminal manipulations of our elections in Michigan, and my office stands ready and willing to uphold that promise. Our government has a solemn duty to afford its citizens a safe, secure, accurate election, and we will prosecute bad actors to the fullest extent of the law when our elections come under threat. But the responsibility is not in our hands alone. As has always been the case for American democracy, voters bear responsibility as well. And it is the responsibility of the voter, first and foremost, to know whether they voted and to not attempt a second ballot. And it is no less the responsibility of election workers to ensure that double voting does not occur, that they're following all the rules and procedures set forth to deliver a secure election. These are our collective responsibilities to maintain our democracy and our republic. And if those responsibilities are abandoned, my office will act swiftly on its responsibility to hold criminals accountable. And with that, happy to take some questions.
Are you
Simon?
saying?
So I'm going to start with Simon real quick, and then I'll get you out.
Thank you. Attorney General, your findings in this case are significant. Do you believe that the defendants were working together as part of a larger scheme?
Yeah, I can't answer that question. I don't know. We know that all 7 of these people committed crimes. In terms of whether this was a pattern or a scheme that they were working together, we don't have evidence to suggest that. Not saying that, as things move forward, there won't be further evidence. But as of right now, all we know are that these 4 people voted twice, that they knew that they were voting twice, and that these 3 election officials knew by their actions that they were specifically allowing these people to vote more than once.
Edwin?
Piggybacking on what you just said, so you're alleging that they knew, which I think intent might be really important in this, they knew that they wanted to vote twice.
Yes, we believe that. Technically speaking, these are strict liability crimes, but I think we have sufficient evidence to show that, these individuals, remember, they had to fill out their envelopes, right? They had to fill out the ballots, they had to put the, everything into the sleeve, and then close the envelope, and then sign it. It's their signature on the back, and then send it in to the clerk's office where it had been received. So all of those things happened, and yet they still came in to vote. In 3 of the 4 cases, I will tell you, they filled out affidavits that were just plainly false because they said that they never received an absentee ballot, and we know that's not true.
And the staff that you charged, I think it's important to emphasize again, these were just not simple mistakes.
Right, and if I could just walk you through it one more time.
Yeah.
So the voter comes in, the poll worker, would have pulled them up in the electronic poll book, and you get this big message that flashes on there saying that that person has already voted and that their ballot has been received. Do we have a copy of that? Okay, so that flashes up, and so they know there's an indication already this person's ballot has already been received, recorded by the clerk's office. And so at that point, that poll worker who's at that precinct would have called into the help desk to speak to the assistant clerks and said, hey, this person is here to vote in person, but the electronic poll book is indicating that they've already voted. And so then the assistant clerk, the 3 clerks that we charge, would have pulled up the qualified voter file. They would have seen right in there that that person had voted and that their vote had been received, and then they had to not just tell the poll worker at the precinct, no, that's okay, provide them with another ballot, but then they had to go in and they had to change the qualified voter file from received and then change that to rejected, knowing that it wasn't rejected, making no effort then to go to the counting board to pull their ballot. And by the way, it's not legal to do that anyway on election day. So even even if they had done that, they still wouldn't be following the law, but at least it would show some effort to ensure that they weren't trying to vote more than once. But here they knew that those ballots had already been received. Again, they were already in the process of being counted when they said, no, just issue them a second ballot. So there's no way that they could not have known that by their actions, they were allowing them to vote a second time.
Yeah, correct.
I believe you referenced this. Could this have been a misunderstanding of what the law on spoiling a ballot is? P. Lucido said that all of these individuals tried to spoil their ballot. You said you can't spoil your ballot, but could they have been under the understanding from the election officials that were guiding them that they were allowed to do this?
Well, first of all, we believe that the evidence will not show that they were trying to just vote for somebody else and spoil their first ballot. We think the evidence will show that they were trying to vote a second time. But more so than that, I think what's really clear from the perspective of the clerks is that, remember, it's never been legal to do this on Election Day. So even though there is a method by which a person can spoil their ballot, that would have had to have happened a long time before. It would have had to happen, 2 Fridays before? I want to say 2 Fridays before would be the last time that they would have been able to spoil a ballot if they wanted to. But remember, it's never been the law of the state of Michigan that you could do this on Election Day. Ever, ever, ever. Now, why is that? Because they start counting, and again, this is now changed, but even in the before times, before we changed the law, they already start counting the votes at 7 a.m. They're feeding them into the tabulators at, the counting center where they have all the absentee ballots that have already been received and checked in. And so if the polls open at 7 a.m., there is a good chance that they've already had that vote counted. And again, because these are anonymous, there's no way, once it comes out of the sleeve and it's fed into the tabulator, you're done. There's no taking that back. So there is just no way that these assistant clerks could have possibly been under the impression that somehow these folks were spoiling their ballots. They had to know that they were being counted twice. And we believe that, again, while we don't have to show intent, we believe there's going to be evidence to demonstrate they weren't trying to spoil their ballots.
So did they attempt to spoil their ballot or not, their initial ballot?
As I indicated, we don't have evidence they're trying to spoil their ballot. We have evidence that they tried to vote twice and that they did, in fact, vote twice.
John?
How much of this, I'm curious, your decision after Mr. Lucido decided, not to prosecute, how much is based on what happened in 2020, the doubt that was sowed by the court cases and everything, and where we sit today ahead of another general? How do you weigh that versus your decision here that, we need to prosecute these people? I'm assuming that played a role. I don't want to necessarily make that assumption without asking you.
Well, we want to make sure that people have full faith and confidence in our elections. We don't want people to try to vote twice, and we certainly don't want clerks that in any way, shape, or form are aiding and abetting in that process, right? Now, remember, this happens extremely rarely. Now, I will tell you that I personally have talked to countless clerks at this point because I wanted to know, how often does this occur? So I've talked to municipal clerk after municipal clerk. I've talked to, county clerks. I talked to clerks of very large counties who say, in 20 years, we haven't had 4 double votes. So to have it 4 times in one municipality, in one election, is, I think deeply concerning is the way I would put that. So that played a role. But then, moreover, of course, when I saw the statements, Prosecutor Lucido didn't just deny charges. He was very explicit as to why he was denying charges. And I wrote down exactly what he said. He did an interview with Fox 2 with Charlie Langton. And I was just deeply disturbed by some of the comments he made. First of all, he indicated that only 1 vote counted. And we know that that's just factually wrong. All 4 of them were able to double vote. So, we thought that needed to be corrected. And then, in addition, he really provided the public, I think, with false information about what you can and can't do. And I want to be really exact about this because I don't want to misquote him. But, he said, you can vote twice only if you spoil your first ballot, and then they give you another ballot showing you didn't have any intent to use that ballot, but the second ballot, you can do that. You can go to the clerk's office and say, I'd like my ballot They're not going to give you your ballot back, but what they're going to do is cancel the number of the ballot, and they'll give you a new ballot because there's provisions for that. I mean, that's just not true on Election Day. You can't do that. Again, there are circumstances that you can do that well before the Election Day, but he should know that you can't do it on Election Day. You've never been able to do it on Election Day. That's not the law. I actually will specifically read from the Bureau of Elections manual, which talks about absent voters appearing at the polls. It says, if a voter who has been issued an absent voter ballot appears at an early voting site or in-person precinct on Election Day to offer the vote, the e-poll book will alert the election inspector that the voter was issued an absent voter ballot. The election inspector should take the following actions depending on whether the voter did not receive the absent ballot, or received but did not return it, or didn't return their absent voter ballot to the clerk, or is appearing with the absent voter ballot in person. It's got the manual for all of this, but the important language is what happens when the voter was sent, received, and returned their absent voter ballot. They can't, and there's a really good reason for it that I already indicated to everybody. It means that you'd be voting twice, and some people you can't have elections where some people get to vote twice and other people only get to vote once. Obviously, that's not a fair election. So, for all these reasons, I thought it was really important that we pursue charges in this matter.
Yeah, Lauren.
Yeah, Attorney General, can you speak to the experience level of the clerks who were charged, like how many elections they have been involved in? And is there any indication that any other election workers at these precincts noticed this and tried to intervene?
So the information that we have, first of all, I can't speak to what the experience was of those 3 clerks. I don't know if anybody else has that information. Does anyone? Okay, so we don't have that. But I will say in terms of the workers at the precinct, their instructions were, if this becomes an issue, if somebody comes in and tries to vote in person, but when this pops up, you can see that we've already received one, call the help desk to talk to these assistant clerks. Now, that's not really how the process, I think, is supposed to work, or usually does work. In most of the clerks that I spoke to, they said that immediately that you're supposed to turn the person away and say, nope, we've already received your ballot. If you have an issue, go talk to the clerk's office. Go to City Hall, talk to the clerk. And I actually talked to some clerks who said what they'll do is they'll show the person, like, here, we pulled your ballot, here's the envelope, here's your signature. And sometimes what some of the municipal clerks will actually do is they would even send that poll worker a picture of the back of their ballot to be like, here's what we received, here's the date we received it, and then turn them away. In this particular set of circumstances, it appeared to us from the information we had that instead of doing that, the process at these St. Clair Shores, precincts was, if you have an issue like that come up, call the help desk. So the workers at the precincts were doing the right thing. Like, they noticed it, it came up, they didn't just automatically give them a ballot, they called the help desk. They talked to these highly trained assistant clerks and said, what do I do? And they just followed the instructions that were given by the city clerks. That was, of course, erroneous and violated the law, but we don't believe that they knowingly did anything wrong because they were just following the process.
We'll repeat my request that folks lead off with name and affiliate, and I'll go to College Jackson, Michigan Public.
Hi, Attorney General. I apologize if I misheard you, but it seemed like I have in my notes earlier that you said there were 59 incidents of double voting in the primary election. Are all those folks also being charged by the state, or what's going on with those cases?
Yeah, so those cases are all either being investigated, or there are charges that are pending, or they're still being reviewed. So everything is investigated, but remember, that's out of 1.8 million votes cast all around the state of Michigan. So many of those, well, they'll get investigated by MDOS, be referred to our department sometimes, as it's happened in, 4 of these instances. The local prosecutor will review it, but that's normally the process.
Have any of those cases been investigated and had the case closed before without a charging decision or without charges being referred to your office?
I don't think so.
Not for the 2024, I don't think.
Yeah.
Attorney General, quick question about your statements regarding Prosecutor Lucido. Have you spoken with Prosecutor Lucido about his statements, expressing your concerns? Was there a back and forth between you two about this, or is this the first time that you're raising these concerns about his statements? And what did he say?
Yeah, I've not spoken to him about this. Obviously, I was alarmed by it. Like I said, facts were inaccurate. The law that was applied also incorrect. What I would say is this, and I'm certainly not insinuating that this was intentional on his part. But for the prosecutor's offices out there, and I would say this in terms of some of the investigative agencies as well, I think what's hard sometimes is they don't normally handle these cases. It's very infrequent. And so I think that mistakes are made. Election law is hard. And investigating an election fraud case can be difficult too if you don't know all the policies, all the procedures, all the laws. And I think that what happens oftentimes, and again, not to be dismissive of the county prosecutors who work very, very hard, but I think that generally speaking, you got your gun cases, you got your drug cases, you got your rapes, robberies, murders. These are infrequent. And it's difficult because, again, the law is very specific. The law changes. There's so many different procedures that are involved here. And I think if you're not highly familiar with this, the way that our staff has become, it's easy to make mistakes.
Just to follow up, so what's the current status of all these individuals? Have they been taken into custody? Are they being served? What's going on with that?
There are outstanding warrants, and they've been alerted to that, right? Each of the defendants have been alerted. So we don't have arraignment dates or anything like that right now.
One follow-up, Attorney General. How old are the individuals that
Let's see. It's in the press release.
Yeah, we will have that up shortly after.
Yeah.
Kim can get it to you before we leave this.
Yeah. I'll.
Ed, were you?
I think a couple things. This was a primary. Were they voting, which primary were they voting?
Which primary were they voting in?
Well, were they taking a Democratic ballot, a Republican ballot?
Well, it's the same ballot. It's not like a presidential primary where you only get one.
Right, but-
You get the exact same ballot. We don't know how you fill that out. It's an anonymous ballot. So however you filled that ballot out, we would have no idea. It's only in the presidential primary that you would pull, like, I want to vote in the, Republican presidential primary or the Democratic. But that's not how it works for a regular primary. We'll never know.
And who raised this? Who said, hey, we got some problems here? Who got the investigation going? Was it a tip? Was it?
It was the St. Clair Shores clerk, as you're required to do by law. When you have tabulations where it's clear that you had more ballots than voters, then you are required to report that. And she reported it to Anthony Forlini, the Macomb County clerk. She reported it to the Macomb County prosecutor's office. She reported it to MDOS. So she did her job as the law prescribes. And that's how all of us found out about it.
All right, and we'll close it out with one more from Craig.
This is on the broad topic of the elections in general. Did you read Jack Smith's latest findings in his investigation of Donald Trump? He wrote at length, if you read it, about what happened at TCF Center in the November 2020 election.
I read your recitation of what was in the
Appreciate
report,
that.
yes.
Why didn't your office investigate what occurred at TCF Center?
I mean, I don't know that we had evidence of a specific crime that occurred there.
So I think we did.
Did
I
we?
think there were some reports that were generated that they wanted us to investigate. We looked at the
Mhm.
stuff that was coming out, and there weren't anything to follow up on.
Falsely.
Yeah.
All
Right.
Thank
This
you.
one opens this one. I think we need to there for a moment. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.